Thank you. These were two very interesting presentations, and I wish, of course, that I had been able to read your film papers or more of the research you are doing at the moment in order to give a better response. But I will do my best. Where is Håkon? There he is. I didn't see you. I didn't see you. So. Håkon reminds us of our connection to nature as observers, that actually we are part of nature. It's not that we previously thought that nature and the observer, or we human beings, are like separate. We can't lift ourselves out of it. So we are actually part of nature, and more than that, when we look at nature or study it, measure it, then we disturb it. Also, he told us that how we look upon the world depends on how we model the world. And since he was talking about quantum mechanics, so we know already that in quantum mechanics there are many models. And adding all the other models to that, that would imply that we have pluralism, not only of models, but also pluralism of worldviews. So then I wondered, like, why is it then that there is still somehow an agreement about how the world actually, how we look at the world amongst us, an inter-subjective idea? So perhaps is it that scientists globally have agreed upon some models on which we have lived on, and who may change and also have changed during history? Free will in quantum physics is independently of history. If the experimentalist has free will to decide the settings of the instrument, and here I have a little question. The Copenhagen interpretation, before measuring, there are no results. It should be at the moment of measuring then that the quantum system freely chooses how to show itself in particles or waves. Okay, and that's, I think, I can really accept that without problem. But what I want to ask then is, in what lies the freedom of the observer, of the one measuring the quantum system? Perhaps the choice lies, or the freedom lies, in relation to the expected or hypothesized results. So I will wait here just to be able to continue with Hans' presentation on Walter Friedman, very interesting. So willful acts maker. So, but decision maker, I think, needs free will to at least to some extent. Wait, I've just been. And the brain is a system for creating meaning. And meaning implies context, but also intention. But here I thought, like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I really understand you correctly here, because also intention implies context, and not sure if context or meaning implies intention, but intention implies meaning and context. I think we need to discuss this a little bit further, because it becomes a little bit confusing. What also was very interesting was Aquinas' doctrine of intentionality. The self trusts the body to, I just say it shortly, experience the world. But then again, philosophically, what do we mean by the self here? Is it other than the body, so that the self can trust the body in doing its job? Or is it simply supervising, or are both body and self or mind complementary? And do I still have? I have still, yes. Decision-making system. So evaluation of decision-making is connected to a prospective punishment or award. and decision-making seems not to be as rational as we want to believe. So here also I would like to hear a little bit more of you, in what sense you mean it. And then you said also that emotion and cognition interact in order to establish behavior. And here I was thinking a little bit, it's common to say that cognition is the one that is rational. It is not often so much said about emotions, and I would also like to have a little bit your comments on that or response on that, because I have some kind of feeling that emotions can be very rational as well, and we can further develop it because I have to go a little bit further now, I think. So, and then your model of free will related to, here you named the lateral prefrontal cortex. And I have read a lot about the ventral prefrontal cortex in decision making. I saw also a little bit about the lateral prefrontal cortex. So also here I would like to learn a little bit more, and more perhaps others than me, how this really is connected. As I said, I would very much appreciate to read the whole paper, of course. So I think I will end this one here, and then I have, see what I have here, I think, yes. This I have to admit a little bit, it was a little difficult to follow, and also because I don't have the real material before me. And also I would like to read more about your work. So where do actions come from? And you go against the closed cognitivism model. It doesn't work as that well according to you and your experiment. So you also named Vittorio Gallese and his idea or question about vision, whether it is connected to prefrontal cortex activity, and apparently it is. And this, his idea and James Gibbs's idea about affordance, which is also very attractive. I wrote a little bit about this. What I found very interesting as well, and especially from a philosophical point of view, is that you say that intentions do not cause action planning and execution processes. They emerge from that. And also I would like to hear a little bit more from you. How do you see this emergence in relation to intentions? Because I think this is very, from my part anyway, very interesting. And of course, I can agree very much with your conclusion that the contrast between reflexes and deliberate actions may not be as sharp as we previously might have thought. Okay, I end here. So I just try to follow a little bit all of your very interesting but also quite difficult sciences and research. And I'm just open and looking forward to hear more of it. Thank you.
First question. Okay.
Thanks. I wanted to ask about what the panel, I remember the panel's conception of the relationship between metaphysics and models. Taki, you said in your presentation that metaphysics is a kind of model. And I think that's, if I understood you correctly, I think that's mistaken. For example, you could be a materialist, which is a metaphysical position, but it doesn't commit you to any particular model of cognitive processes. It limits certainly the models that you can choose from, but it doesn't seem to, this is a question for the panel, it doesn't seem to drive a choice of model, at least in a particularly discrete way. So it's as a general matter, do any of you have any comments or reflections about the relationship between the metaphysical position and the model to explain cognitive processes?
Hello. Okay. Well, thank you for the question. My limited understanding of philosophy tells me that behind the ordinary way we are doing science in the laboratory, there are metaphysical assumptions. This is what I call metaphysics, namely unoutspoken hypotheses concerning how we should structure the things we are doing. And they are usually not always discussed openly in the community because they are learned by hands-on in the laboratories and in the theoretical laboratories, how to perceive that. And I think that the example I took was that Newton's idea concerning absolute time, absolute space, and his three laws, they are never questioned in ordinary mechanics. And they become like a metaphysical basic structure. And therefore, when Einstein came and said, well, we have to take them down from the Olympic heights and see if they are valid, maybe we should question them. That was the first attempt to understand that they are models in this sense. So there are levels of models. I would agree with you that the metaphysical does not give you very much information, but it tells you how to formulate a model of a certain specific system. That is what the metaphysics tells you. And there are layers beyond that, of course, too. As I mentioned, for example, causality seems to be an assumption that we impress upon the experimental situation. You want to interpret it in a causal way. But then, if it fails, you are completely lost. What shall I do? Quantum physics does not accept causality. You cannot predict anything, because causality is supposed to be a rational modeling with mathematical functions. Of course, that is already a specification of what it means, but that is how I see it. So, for me, the assumptions behind the way in which I formulate a specific model is the metaphysics. Then there can be assumptions behind that metaphysical structure, which I call framework, and so on, I don't know, until we come to the common language, which is the highest metaphysical level we know, because that's the only way where we have a consensus, I think, more or less, in an intersubjective way.
May I also say something? From a philosophical point of view, metaphysics, it depends a little bit how you understand it. If you take the Aristotle interpretation, what Aristotle had with metaphysics, in his book Metaphysics, it's more or less a theory of physics. It's like physics lying on physics, physical theories on physics, while more commonly how we understand metaphysics is more a holistic view of physics, on physical interpretations of the world. So I don't know, Håkan, what you would say about it in quantum mechanics, which of the two concepts would suit best to quantum mechanics, the Aristotelian or the more common philosophical one?
Well, I'm not sure that I could answer that question. I understood Aristotle's discussion concerning the fact that metaphysics was a book that came, I think, after physics, because he wanted to explain it, and that's why the word. But it is generally assumed, I think, in a very general sense, that it's the ideas that are behind that are usually not questioned. And we have to question them, then in which language do we question them? So I think when it comes to quantum mechanics, you have to leave more or less completely the basic structure of Newtonian physics behind you and start with Hilbert spaces and all kinds of strange things that people could not relate directly to in the experimental laboratory. So that's why it took quite a long time, 25 years, to figure out how to work out a theory that could be useful in the laboratory. And when you said then that there are very different models of quantum mechanics, I don't agree with that. There is one mathematical structure that is universally accepted and is not questioned, not even by David Bohm. It is interpretation of this that is a question. And interpretation is, of course, up to anyone who put this interpretation of the structure into a big framework. That depends very much on your experiences, on your taste, on your many things.
That's true, but thank you for reminding us that I should have said that interpretations of models.
Just a few words about modeling. I think it's very important to recognize this, that we are only dealing with models. I mean, as soon as we are born, or perhaps even before, we make models of the world. I mean, this is how we cope with a complex world, and we make different kinds of models. I mean, the scientific models is just one type of models that we are dealing with, but there are many other types of models. And I would agree with Håkan that you can call the metaphysical ideas that we have some kind of a model. I mean, it's another, or framework. I mean, what words we use, but the main idea is that we are representing or trying to bring out an understanding of the complex world that we live in, and we try to put it in different contexts. And the scientific models that we are dealing with have a special character, and I mean, they are testable, they are discussable, and that we in natural science we try to make them quantifiable and so forth. But and it's easier to criticize scientific models and other models and so forth. But to have the idea that we can be without models, I think is not a very, very fruitful approach to our understanding of what how we relate to some kind of reality that I think most of us probably believe in. So we are only dealing with models all the time. That's my point.
Okay, next question.
Okay, Hans, I'm glad that you have been bringing up a problem that is coming closer to real problems of decision, of human decision making the decision of taking the car or taking the train. Something like that is more than just making the decision of pressing the right or left button. It reminds me a little bit of yesterday's evening that this kind of decision is always somehow imprecise and vague. As you have shown, it can change. And yesterday evening, when I made the decision to take the red wine, as I said it at that moment, I thought maybe it should have been better to take the white one. Okay, so this is real decision making in daily life, and you made this with a computer. Well, just adding a little bit randomness, or maybe having a little bit chaos, that is coming very close to what we see in human decision making in this kind of problems. Does your computer make this decision on the basis of its free will, or it would, if you would look from outside on the decisions that your computer makes, maybe you would come close to consider this as somebody who is making kind of imprecise but decision, but of changing free will. What is the relation? What else do you need to?
Yeah, I think we are simulating it. So from the outside, it may be very difficult to look at a robot, for example, which is behaving in a certain way, whether it is conscious or has a free will and so forth. Except for if we can see that the system, in some sense, makes a decision and then becomes happy, for example. so if it has an effect that is observable, I mean, we can deduce, we can never, I think, come to a conclusion whether you have a free will, for example. I know I have a free will, but I don't know that you have one. But I deduce it from that we are similar, we are humans and so forth. And I can even say that my dog has a free will because I can see similar reactions and similar way of behaving and so forth. But that is an assumption, of course. And so it's more or less a matter of how plausible your assumptions or your conclusions are based on what you observe and what you can infer from your observations. So I wouldn't say that the computer has a free will or has consciousness, but we can simulate it fairly well.
If you cannot say this even for me or your dog, is there any criterion for a free will?
Only for yourself.
Only, okay.
I wanted to ask, following your talk, thank you. So you were not able to decode more abstract goals when you were in the context, but I'm now being reminded of a paper which unfortunately I don't remember the author, maybe someone here would remember, about the mirror neurons in the monkey, where they would grasp the object. There was an object that could be grasped, that could be opened like that, or using a different motor scheme. And they found neurons that coded the intention and not the actual motor movement. So how does that fit with your idea?
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. I think the Kunota is the first author of this one. They found indeed when they had normal pliers and inverse pliers, the one you use for opening oysters, apparently. I don't eat them regularly. So the motor act is different, but the act of opening is the same. I must say this, okay, so this contrast is between very low-level muscle movements and a immediate goal in the world. And so it's still, I think, very low level in my picture here, which I think are about decisions of what you want to achieve. Also, I randomize the left and the right buttons here, so it's also detached from the motor specifics. So, of course, there must be some generalization in the brain. I mean, we can generalize, so our brain must be able to generalize. The thing is, how do we do it? And my main message from this study is then that we may think that there is this generalization mechanism in the brain, while in fact it may just reflect some variance in the experimental study.
But do you think that if you would have chosen a more abstract goal, perhaps? So this is also quite a low-level goal, to open or to show.
Yeah.
So if you would go for a more abstract goal, perhaps to do the found, that might have been represented as a representation and not as a specific goal.
I think yes. I think the study that John got famous for is where he was able to decode adding or subtracting numbers. And I don't think it would have mattered much if John would have had supermarket adding or breakfast adding in there. So of course it doesn't work for all kinds of cognition.
Okay, do we have another question?
So I was interested in the way that you introduced cultural and epistemological dimensions of free will. So you mentioned in your talk, Arkin, that the experimenter has free will about which study they do and things like that. And this is all true and it's interesting and it's perhaps related to the sociology of human knowledge, and I just wondered whether that's a separate problem. So, for example, in neuroscience, people think about the quote free will problem unquote as being the question of whether there's endogenous decision-making capacity and endogenous action capacity in the human or animal nervous system. And that's fine, that's an interesting question as well. And I just think it's probably rather separate. So I was interested in your talk that you brought in a whole aspect of free will that I personally was surprised by. I think it's interesting, but it seems to be at a completely different level from the question of what is the generative capacity and decisive capacity of a nervous system. So why should we bring those things together? I personally would probably favour keeping them apart, and I just wondered if anybody in the panel can comment on that. One question is about what mechanisms do we have in our brain and what do they allow us to do? And another question is something about the practice of human activity.
May I just make a comment in the beginning, but I don't think that will be in any way exhaustive. But first of all, of course, when you speak about knowledge, that is a separate subject. I mean, we have to have a system of how to acquire knowledge that decides what are the conditions for calling this thing which I believe in knowledge. So that would bring us into a long discussion. I don't want to enter that. But for me, when I entered into science, I mean, the understanding that you have a free will to put up models, a free will to decide what to do in a laboratory became an essential aspect of the scientific project that I've been working with for so long time. And when someone then comes up to say, well, I go to the laboratory and try to figure out why did I do this in the first place? It seems to me very similar to the understanding of you have axioms, you derive theorems. You don't believe to derive the axioms from the theorems. I mean, what is the prerequisite of scientific project shouldn't be able to come out from it. It should be consistent. But to me, it's like putting the cart before the donkey.
But many people in this room probably believe that the mechanisms of human volition are deeply continuous with those of primate volition or other kinds of animal volition. But no other animal, apart from humans, has scientific theories, laboratories, the capacity to reflect on what a model is, the insight into whether they are freely choosing the hypothesis for their next experiment or not. So that the things that you're describing sound extremely self-reflective and extremely interesting in terms of what science is, but I don't think they're necessarily related to what volition is.
I have no more comment than the fact that if you ask to prove the input from the output, then there is a problem, I think.
Maybe I can briefly add the mirror neurons you mentioned, but what is little known is that the mirror neurons, they're supposed to be reflex-like action, perception, couplings. But when the monkey's not interested, has enough food, you won't find any mirror neuron firing at all. So also there, this monkey has some sort of will which shuts off or shuts on its mirror neuron activity. So even there's no meta theory or anything like we think is typically human volition, and there is some sort of will still there.
Well, you're certainly right that the importance of needs in volition has been systematically underemphasized.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay. If
That's
it's
a short correction of my question. I should not have asked for whether your computer model has a free will, just to ask whether it has a will. And whether you would like to have a computer model that has a will. I would not like to have my car as its own will.
okay, so we can continue that discussion offline. Let's thank our panel.